Rimuru Tempest has plenty of powerful people working for him, but not all of his subordinates are crazy forces of nature and are able to excel in their own field. This is especially true for Hakurou, who despite having low magic skill levels is able to make up for it with his swordsmanship skills and knowledge. That's why in today's video, we'll be taking a look at Hakurou's character, his backstory, powers and abilities, and find out just how powerful he truly is. As usual, there will be light novel spoilers for his character, so here's a spoiler warning just in case, and if you enjoyed the video, feel free to give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more Tensura content in the future.
Hi.
Before Hakurou joined Rimuru Tempest, he was part of the ogre village that lived in the Great Jura Forest. He was the strongest swordsman in the village and he served as the main instructor as well, being responsible for passing down their sword fighting techniques. Now, a little backstory about Hakurou's fighting technique and his village, because it wasn't always like this. Around 400 years ago, the ogres were pretty much the typical savage monsters that we would expect, but one day they would encounter a group of injured warriors that came to their village, and because the ogres were against fighting the injured, so they took them in. The warriors thanked the ogres by introducing their own culture to them, showing them how to make their weapons and armors, and even taught them their fighting techniques. This is the reason why we see the ogres possessing East Asian aesthetics, because the warriors were actually otherworlders. Hakurou's grandfather and master was one of these otherworlders, and his name was Byakuya Araki. Araki was the founder of the sword style that the ogre used and the one that Hakurou teaches to his students, the Oboro-ryu style. Now I want to clarify something, because in volume 15, Hakurou mentions that his grandfather taught him the Mizuru style, but later in volume 18, it became known as the Oboro-ryu style, so I'm not sure if there's continuity error or it's just a translation problem. So to make it easier, I decided to just refer to it as the Oboro-ryu because it's the one mentioned in the latest volume, but if you know anything about it, please let me know in the comments down below. Moving on, there are 4 techniques that are mentioned in the light novel, and the first one is called GOKATOTSU, or the 5 flower strikes. It's a stabbing technique used to target the key points of the human body. Also, techniques like the 5 flower strikes and above are considered to be secret techniques that only a selected few are allowed to learn. Next is the Zakuro, or also known as the Rokazan. It's a high-speed slashing blow that deals non-lethal damage to opponents. Then we have the Yanagi or the Nananagi, a defensive sword technique that is used to parry the opponent's attacks. Finally, the highest technique that can be learned is called the YAEZAKURA, or the 8 flower flash, a continuous slashing and stabbing technique that hits the opponent with different combinations of attacks. This is a technique kept from the public, and only the master can decide whether or not to teach their students. Of course, like his grandfather, Hakurou has mastered the Oboro-ryu, and even before he was named, he was already a renowned swordsman, being called the Ogre Swordsman or the Demon Swordsman. But sadly, in present day, Hakurou's village was eventually destroyed by the orcs and his people were all killed, although he managed to barely escape with 5 other ogres into the forest. It was in the forest that they would encounter Gopta and the hobgoblins, but they were able to easily take care of them, which prompted Rimuru to come help. When Rimuru arrived, he took care of the 3 ogres, leaving only a yet to be named Hakurou and Benimaru to fight. During their fight, Hakurou was able to easily see through all the skills of the monsters that Rimuru had predated before, and could even tell that he possessed magic sense just by observing the way he fought. That's not all, because while Benimaru was distracting Rimuru, Hakurou was able to hide his presence to evade Rimuru's magic sense, and he was even powerful enough to slice off Rimuru's right arm that had multi-layer barrier and body armor protecting it. This actually makes Hakurou one of the few individuals in the series that actually did visible damage to Rimuru. But after Rimuru showed his true powers, they surrendered to him and they managed to clear up the misunderstanding. He then invited the ogres back to the village for a feast, and they would later become the 3rd group of monsters to be named by him. After the naming, Hakurou evolved into a Kijin and he was able to regain his youth, going from an old man to a middle-aged man in his prime. He also acquired the rank of a Special A or the Calamity class despite his magical levels being only at the Hazard class. This is because of his proficiency with the use of arts, techniques performed by manipulating the user's innate aura and additional magical energy when needed. They don't behave like magic and require no chanting, they also can't be acquired like skills and can only be learned through training and effort. Now here are some of the arts that Hakurou is able to use. Battle Will, which allows him to turn his own energy into fighting spirit or aura and using it to strengthen his body. He can also use Mortal Will, and this lets him turn his fighting spirit or aura into offensive magic projectiles or bubbles that can have the added effect of skills and magic. Another one is called Form Hide, and it lets Hakurou completely hide his presence and form. He also has a more powerful version of Form Hide called HAZE, and it works in stages where he would first get rid of any sound, wiping away his scent, disguising his temperature, and finally completely wiping away his aura and spirit. This was actually the same move that he used against Rimuru before, because the user will become totally undetectable to even magic sense, and the only way to counter is with pure instinct. Finally, he could use instant move as well. It's an art that allows him to rapidly increase his speed for a single movement, making it look almost like he's teleporting. Now when it came time to fight the orcs, Hakurou joined the battle as well, and it was easy for him as he simply sliced them into pieces, then using Mortal Will to release an aura to burn the corpses so the orcs can't devour their allies. That said, because of his proficiency with arts and swordsmanship, Rimuru made him the official military instructor of the Tempest Federation. Rimuru also wanted to learn swordsmanship, so he became Hakurou's first student, or a better term would be victim, because according to Rimuru, he would often get his ass beaten for hours by Hakurou during training. But luckily, Gopta and the Goblin Riders would join him as well, and they became Hakurou's next victims. After the Orc disaster was defeated, Gabriel and his Dragoneers would join the Tempest Federation as well, so it meant more victims for Hakurou. Eventually, he acquired more students when Yom and his party joined Tempest as well, and later the Beastman Grucius was also dragged into the hellish training. He would go on to teach Shuna some jujutsu for self-defense, teaching Shion how to fight with her fist and the importance of technique instead of brute force. Later, the Otherworlder children would also become his students when they were brought to live in Tempest. 300 years ago, he even taught a young Gazer Dwargo swordsmanship before he became known as the Hero King, so that's definitely impressive. But anyways, when the Former Kingdom attacked Tempest, Hakurou had faced the Otherworlder KYOYA Tachibana, but he lost because the anti-magic barrier had weakened him. After Hakurou recovered, he was able to face KYOYA again, but this time KYOYA was clearly outmatched. None of his attacks worked against Hakurou because of Heaven's Gaze, and when KYOYA tried to get close, Hakurou simply sped up his movement with instant move, and within less than a second, Hakurou was able to use Crestwater Slash to behead KYOYA, ending the battle. Later when Gyat was about to finish Shogo Taguchi off, Hakurou quickly noticed the trap magic set by the sorcerer Razan, and he managed to stop Gyat just in time, again showing how good his intuition was. During Rimuru's Harvest Festival, Hakurou received a gift from the Voice of the World in the form of the unique skill Martial Master. The skill contains 5 sub-skills, and the first one is called Heaven's Gaze. It basically allows him to sense the surrounding magic from the flow of magicuse to the extent of his force, and it works better than Magic Sense. With this, he can have a better idea on the opponent and allows him to predict their movements during battle. Next is Thought Acceleration that essentially raises his thought processing speed by 1000 times. The third sub-skill is called Ultra Acceleration, and it works like instant move, but it gives him a greater amount of movement speed boost. Then we have Foresight that gives Hakurou the ability to predict the future but with certain parameters and limitations. Finally, the last sub-skill is called Mystery, and I think this works like the haze technique that he uses and allows him to hide his presence to opponents. Additionally, Hakurou also obtains several extra skills like Magic Sense, allowing him to perceive the surrounding magical energy or magicuse, Multilayer Barrier so he can create a thin, colorless and invisible barrier that consists of several layers to protect himself, Steel Strength, an ability that strengthens his body, and finally Danger Sense, the ability to detect potential danger. But I think his strongest ability by far is going into God mode whenever someone calls him an old man. Jokes aside though, Hakurou doesn't really get much time to shine later on other than having his backstory and character expanded a bit more. For instance, after the Farmer attack, he was sent to Demon Lord Claimer's Dominion along with Soe and Shuna to infiltrate his castle where he fought the Death Knight Albert, but there was no conclusion to the fight because Shuna had defeated the Daumon. Later he was mostly absent throughout the story because he was left in Claimer's Dominion to survey the land, but we did find out that he has a daughter though. Apparently the Tengu Queen Kaide used to be a student of Byakuya Araki and she trained alongside Hakurou in the past, but after a series of events, she eventually became pregnant with Hakurou's daughter who was later named Momiji. Besides that, not much else happened until the Eastern Empire eventually attacked and Hakurou was asked to serve as a military advisor to Gopta's First Legion, which comprised of the Goblin Riders and the Green Numbers. Throughout the battle, he mostly just gave tactical orders and guidance to the goblins, but he did get to join the battle where he started to cut down numerous Imperial soldiers. Hakurou even encountered one of the Imperial Near Guards, ranked 97, but before the dude even introduced himself, he was already cut down. After the Eastern Empire attack was stopped, Rimuru held a reward ceremony to awaken those who were worthy into true Demon Lords. However, Hakurou did not meet the requirements to awaken, but he was gifted a legendary great weapon forged by Kurobe as a reward instead. Now, Hakurou's biggest challenge was during the second Eastern Empire attack where he had to fight against Lieutenant Kondo, an otherworlder that also knew about the Oboro Ryu. This was because Kondo was apparently related to Byakuya Araki's family, so there's a chance that Hakurou is related to him. That said, unlike Hakurou who has mastered the Oboro Ryu, Kondo only learned up to the 5 flower strikes, and even though Hakurou has a slight edge over Kondo when it comes to swordsmanship skills, he was still outmatched by Kondo simply because of the difference in fighting and physical abilities, not to mention that Kondo even possessed an ultimate skill. The power gap is clearly evident when Kondo was able to use the 5 flower strikes to defeat Hakurou's 8 flower flash, considered to be the more advanced and powerful technique. Despite losing though, the fact that Hakurou was able to earn the respect and praise from someone like Kondo who had just took down the true dragon Valdora was already quite impressive. That's pretty much everything on Hakurou so far, and after the Eastern Empire fell, he doesn't really get any more spotlight, although the Yellow Primordial Carrera did reveal that OGRE was actually the reincarnated version of Hakurou's grandfather, which is quite an interesting reveal. We also do know that he has an existence value of 60,000, and Rimuru even said that Hakurou can still easily take down opponents with EVs that are several times greater than his own. Overall, I really hope that Hakurou will get more time to shine in future volumes, but based on the power scaling right now, I don't think that's happening anytime soon. However, I do understand that Hakurou doesn't need to be a powerhouse like the rest of Rimuru's subordinates because what's important is the skills, knowledge and wisdom that he can provide to the younger generation.
もう一度眠りたいかの。
師匠
So yeah, what are your thoughts on Hakurou's character, and do you think that he is more suited to take on the role of a wise master rather than a fighter? I would love to hear them in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a like, subscribing to the channel, and hitting that notification bell for more Tensura and other anime content in the future. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay safe everyone.